Welcome to the Swipe Right Effect podcast, where we will be sharing with you the power to get unstuck by swiping right on yourself. Your host, author C.K. Collins, aka Kelly, gets personal with her guests, sharing stories of themselves getting unstuck with wisdom and guidance. Where do you feel stuck? Are you waiting to get your new life started after a big change? You've come to the right place. So with that said, let's get started.
Hey, all you listeners out there. Thanks for joining us today on the Swipe Right Effect, the power to get unstuck. I'm Kelly, pen name CK Collins, and today we're welcoming Kirsten Johansen. And I'm going to give you a little bit more information about her, and then we'll meet her. Kirsten is a resilient survivor of many of life's challenges, and she has developed an approach that centers the development of unconditional positive regard for yourself. I love that. To get to the source of the stubborn thought, feelings, and behavior patterns that cause you suffering and keep you from living your happiest and most authentic life. She guides others through coaching, writing, and hosting her show, GTO Freedom for Human, to unconditional self-acceptance with the tools, strategies, and practices that helped her change her own life. She has direct experience with addiction, disordered eating, body dysmorphia, cancer, radiation disease, inflammatory bowel disease, infertility, trauma, anxiety, depression, narcissistic relationships, divorce, perfectionism, career changes and advancement. Wow. And significant life changes to achieve your dreams. She's a highly educated woman. And I find this very interesting, Kirsten, that you have 12 years as a chemical dependency and relapse prevention specialist. And today we're going to talk about resentment. When we hold resentment, we're re-feeling and re-experiencing a wound caused by treatment that feels unjust, unfair, and just plain awful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But resentment is like a poison. It's a silent, insidious killer of joy, freedom, and happiness. We're going to learn how to prevent new resentments from forming and release the ones you've been holding, even the whoppers. I love that. So thank you for sharing all that with me so that I could share it with the audience. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to see you.
I want to do something a little fun first. I want to ask you about Tango. The name of your company is Giraffe Tango Octopus. And I took 5 weeks of tango lessons in Buenos Aires. So that really caught my eye and I resonated with how you talked about tango. So I was just curious how that ended up in your company name.
Well, thank you for asking about that. When I hit rock bottom, basically, I had hit rock bottom. I think you and I have kind of some similarities in our backgrounds that have set us on our current path. And I left a relationship, I left a job, and, much of my former life was really gone. And I was sort of sitting with that, feeling pretty much the lowest that I had ever felt in my life, in the most pain and most particularly in the most suffering. And I'm going to just say, suffering is preventable. Pain is natural part of human existence, but I was suffering.
Yeah.
And I sort of looked inside myself and I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to find, but I knew that I was suffering because of something that was going on with me. Even though I'd gone through something very difficult and something that really felt catastrophic to me, I just thought, I'm in this place right now because there's something going on with me that has brought me here. And I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want to be in this pain anymore. I want something different and something new. And so I set out the biggest, most important project in my life. I set out to figure out what brought me there and what did I need to do to live a different life. And in the course of that, I peeled all the layers of the onion. Layers I thought, I've been in recovery since 1987. I've been working on myself, quote unquote, for 30 plus years. And I really thought I kind of had gone to the root of me. That was not at all the case. And so in the course of that, to get to your question, in the course of that, I left my job. which I hadn't planned to leave. It was a job I loved with an organization I love. I'd been there about 17 years and I thought I would retire there. But as I changed, as I started to peel everything away, I began to change, and I was surprised that I no longer belonged there. It was no longer for me, and I was no longer for it. And so I left it and gave myself some time. I had some savings, and I gave myself some time to decide what I wanted to do with myself. And so I knew three things: that I wanted to write. I wanted to tell stories using my literal voice, because I do love to tell a story. And I wanted to use my experiences to help others. As you mentioned, I had 12 years as a chemical dependency specialist, and that started at age 20. Before I had even graduated from college, I knew that I wanted to do that. And so I have always had the really gift of being tied to my work in a way that was sort of mission driven and that resonated with me and that felt purposeful. So I'm really grateful for that, because I know that's something that many people don't experience or search for and desire and have some difficulty finding. But I was free floating. I mean, all these structures in my, that made my life what it is and that informed my identity had fallen away. And so there I sat, and I removed. So in terms of what you mentioned in the beginning, the unconditional positive regard for self, which is what I cultivated. And this is coming from a self-hating perfectionist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, polar opposite of the way I had been living and the belief system that I had previously. And when I cleared all of that away, and I sat and thought, well, how do I want to express who I am? How do I want to create, sort of a storefront in a way, right? Because we all sort of need an entrance into our business and what we do. And I thought, well, like, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? And how do I want to express that in a way that that kind of that's creative, first of all, that felt fun. Because I wanted to have fun. I want to have a good time.
Amen to that.
Right? I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And what emerged, it's hard to explain, but what emerged is this identification that I had. I love animals, as many of us do. I'm basically a solitary octopus, and all of the kind of characteristics that if you kind of look into the octopus, or we were chatting a little bit before we started, My Octopus Teacher, that wonderful,
Love that
Netflix,
movie.
right? That
Or
wonderful
documentary,
Netflix
I guess.
documentary. Yeah, it's just wonderful. It does give you some insight into sort of the stealthy, introverted, but goes out to play, and the friends that don't look like her. There was, experiences the world a little bit dangerous, and so has developed some stealth, and so forth. So there was some, many people might have identified with the diver. I identified very much with the octopus. But I'm almost 5'11". I'm heavily tattooed. And I'm kind of lanky, and I walk around the world like a friendly giraffe.
I wasn't expecting that. I got the octopus thing that, I was guessing, but
yeah, I mean, people ask me for directions when I'm a tourist as well. If I look like I'm struggling with something, which, we both have done some solo travel, people will stop what they're doing and come and help me. I have sort of this friendly, kind of gentle giraffeness about me.
Aww.
And so the tango, and I'll kind of throw to you on this, but when you're doing a tango, you are heart to heart, body to body, moving in concert as if you are one in this sort of wonderful dance.
Yeah, for
Would
sure.
you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you're not in tune with the other person, you're stepping all over each other, or you're getting stepped on.
Exactly. So you're almost, either you are moving in concert and you're connected and you're really integrated, or you're struggling. And there's pushing and pulling and conflict and frustration. And that to me is what happens when you don't fully accept who you are. Fully. And allow those parts of you that are disparate and weird and don't match each other to be integrated, and then also to just be expressed.
Right.
And to not worry, well, what will people think of me when they see that I'm an octograph? That's my logo, which is an octopus that has giraffe skin.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I didn't
Yeah.
even notice that. Oh, that's so
Mhm.
funny. I love that.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Well,
it
I
is
loved
about the
the,
integration of self ultimately,
yeah,
and the freedom to express.
I love that. That's really cool. So when you were going through your, the rock bottom time,
Yep.
what was sometimes there's not just one thing, but what was like that first step that you took?
That helped me to emerge from it.
Mhm.
Well, so I had a relationship that ended, and there had been, just some dishonesty and infidelity, and I stayed and tried,
Yeah.
which, yeah,
We have
it
a
is
lot
what
in
it is.
common on that.
Right. And I stayed and tried and worked harder, as a perfectionist is want to do, and a trauma survivor is want to
Right.
do. We
Yeah.
think, well, we'll just work harder. We can fix this. We can make it work. We're smart.
Say that in my book. I just
Mm-hmm.
kept trying harder. I just kept
Oh,
trying to fix it.
boy, oh boy, was I a try harder. I was a try harder my whole life.
Oh.
So part of that was, he really wanted a friendship. We were together 14 years. We were best friends, all the things that often happen when you're with a partner for a long time. And then, that relationship ends, and you're not just losing your intimate partner. I was losing my home. I was losing my best friend. I was losing the future I thought I had. Like, there is often a tremendous amount of loss that comes with
Right.
the end of an intimate partnership. And one of the things that we did was we went to a couples therapist, to try to retain the friendship
Oh, wow.
portion. And even though, looking back, that was not a healthy choice for me. I was not at that time in a place where I could truly center myself. Like, I was heading into this rock bottom. So during this time. And so anyway, we went and saw a therapist, and I would catch her in those sessions staring me deep in the eyes. Like, I would glance over and she would be looking at me in a way that made me feel like she knows something or sees something.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, it was really like, because having been a counselor, a therapist, I
Mhm.
mean, and having been in therapy throughout my life and all
Well,
that stuff. I mean,
you rely on your intuition. Your intuition was telling you something.
it was. And I also, when I'm in therapy, having been in the other chair enough, I'm sometimes observing in a way, like, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, outside of
Sure.
myself. And so anyway, so I sort of catch that happening, and she just very gently recommends a book, and she says about it, something along the lines of, it is um, something like profound and deeply upsetting, is, I think, the way she characterized it.
Wow.
And I thought, interesting. So
Why
I
did you
buy
want
the
me to
book.
read it?
Well, right. I thought, well, that's interesting. And she recommended it to both of us. And so I did buy the book, and then, the separation occurs, and the friendship is not possible.
Mm.
Every interaction becomes more and more painful,
Oh,
for
yeah.
me. And I have to cut it off and go no contact, which is what I still am. And so when I did that, when I had that conversation and realized that I could actually retain nothing of this entity, in a way that I had poured not just my time and my energy and my resources, but my spirit, my love, my dreams, I mean, I had poured a lot
Yeah.
into this relationship and this person. And so when I cut it off and realized that that was it. And that really I could retain nothing. I mean, I sunk into
Yeah.
and so I'm sitting there, and I think it's the same day that I'm describing, where I'm like sitting at my dining room table thinking, this ends here. I don't know how, but this ends here because I'm not doing this again.
Mm.
And I thought, I wonder about that book.
Yeah.
And I stood up and I walked over to the cupboard because I'd moved at that point. I'd moved out of the home that we shared and into a home of my own and all that. And I knew right where it was. And I pulled it out and I went over and I sat on my sofa and it's a one sitting read, really.
Okay.
I mean, it can be. It's not a tome. And I read it straight through, stopping to breathe.
Wow.
And my mind was utterly blown.
Yeah.
Like it was one of those experiences where you feel like it was written for you.
Yeah.
You're all over
Oh,
its
wow.
pages, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, the source of everything
Yeah.
is self-hate.
Mm.
The source of everything is self-hate. And self-hate, it's not me, it's conditioning. It
Mm.
is a liar, an interloper, a conditioning that is introduced so early in our lives that we cultivate it and feed it and water it and believe that it is true.
Right.
And when I literally like in the middle of reading this, I set it down and I said out loud, it's all lies.
Yeah.
It's all lies. All these
Wow.
things I believed about myself and that I believed I had to do to be worthy and
Earn it.
acceptable. Yes, like all these
Yeah.
bars I thought I had to reach, and it's 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 all made up.
Right. Yeah.
And
And it comes from so many different sources. How do you define what's real and what's not? I mean, coming from society, from social media, from your partner, from your parents, from your
all of it.
siblings. Yeah. Coworkers. It can come from so many different places. It's hard to discern, I believe,
Well, and
what's
it's
truth. And if you don't know your own heart, and then that's when it's completely obscure. Like you just
well, you're
there's
a
nothing to
sitting
grasp
duck.
onto. Yeah.
You're a sitting duck a bit. I mean, because if you really, if because you're there, you believe it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and if somebody's, you learn something as a child and then it's reiterated by your peers and perhaps your teachers and the media and all that stuff. And then, in my case, I chose men throughout my life and was never without one, except that after this last thing that I went through, I took 2.5 years where I abstained from everything, which was, oh boy, a wonderful
Yeah.
way to heal that part of me. But I tended to choose men that just reiterated these things that I believed about
Wow.
the value of a woman, and thus my own value and what I had to be in
Right.
order to be valuable and acceptable and to not be betrayed and abandoned,
Yeah.
which happened anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter how good you are or how hard you try. And, for me, it's like so much better on the other side, but you can't see that when it's happening. You can't see it
Oh,
when the breakup first happens. There's just so much to walk through. And when we were talking about, this today and about resentment, I really struggled with that because like
me
in my
too.
case, it's same as you, long-term relationship when we'd been married 30 years. So we'd been together 32.
Mm,
And infidelity was not something I thought would ever come my way.
yep.
And yeah, there was, basically there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And I'm being told, no, there's not. Everything's fine.
Yep.
Gaslighting, basically.
Yep. Yep.
And so, yeah, once everything came out, I think I didn't recognize it as resentment while it was happening. I just kept calling it pain. And
Mhm.
so, but later, you know, it's like as I got better with other things, you know, I was able to do other things to heal myself. A lot of it was solo travel, became more confident. But it was like I'd go back to where, you know, where we lived and in the hometown, and it would
Mhm.
just kind of wash all over me again, like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the anger, the pain, the resentment.
Exactly. Or you're in the kitchen doing whatever, and all of a sudden you realize you're having a conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yet again, you're
Yeah,
having this conversation either out loud or in your mind about, you're telling you're telling the person off, or you're,
yeah,
all that narrative, that spin in the narrative
yeah.
about what
Oh, I
was
just I
done.
remember why did you let it go on so long? Why didn't you
Yes.
let me go? You
Yes.
know,
Same.
all of the things that nothing could ever change. So it's done.
Yes.
And you can't fix it. So
Mm-hmm.
what's the point of spinning in it? But people do. And I now
Yes.
that I've written this book and I've been fairly boldly honest about what happened to me, um, a lot of women come up to me and say, you know, how did you get happy again? I just don't even know where to start. I get Facebook messages from people saying, you said something that I have needed to say for 25 years, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's heartbreaking, but now that I understand and I've recovered myself, that I'm so hopeful for everybody. I'm so hopeful
Mm-hmm.
for these women who contact me. So, but I will say their resentment and the hanging on to that was the hardest thing for me to let go, because without that you can't truly forgive. And so there's that, to
When
me,
you
that
can't be
hump you have to
free,
get over.
you
You
can't be
can't be
free.
free.
Yeah, no. So I mean, and I just want to agree with you and reiterate that if there are listeners that are in it right now, like you are in the pain of it, you are either on the precipice of needing to end something, or something ended, or your heart is broken, or you were mistreated, all the things that often happen that lead to the end of a relationship. And you're in that place where you think there is no way that this is ever going to get any better. This pain is
Mhm.
so intense. I can't imagine ever feeling better. It does get better. And releasing your resentments and knowing when you're experiencing a resentment is critical to moving through, because if you hang on to the resentments, which they kind of masquerade a little bit, it will keep you in the suffering. Resentments cause suffering.
Right.
So you mentioned in the beginning, a resentment, if you break that word down, repeat, sent, feel, we are re-feeling or re-experiencing whatever the wound was, whether it was a person or a situation or whatever it is that your resentment is focused upon. It is yours. It belongs to you. It is not actually about the other person or the situation. It is not about what the other person did or didn't do, said or didn't say. It truly isn't. I know it feels like it is. And that's where we go in our minds when we're caught in the narrative and when we're caught in the resentment, because the resentments are super sticky, like gum in your hair sticky,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if
And
you
there's no easy cure for that either.
know, right, you gotta cut it out, right?
Right. And
You gotta
yeah. And
carefully excise it.
yeah. And my friend Loretta, and this is one of the most important conversation in my book, probably. I mean, I interviewed 10 people, but this conversation, I feel like, saved me. And she said, first of all, she said, your pain, your anger is not hurting anyone but you.
Exactly.
And it is a boomerang. The longer you allow yourself to feel it, it's
Yep.
just creating more and creating more. And, you know, and
Yes.
the vision of that boomerang coming back, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. But I finally understood what I was doing to myself, you know, and I would be
Exactly.
happy 95% of the time, but that 5% of my time would come back and punch me in the gut, trip me, kick me over the fence. And I mean, it was just like awful.
No, it's
And, you know,
intense.
now I realize what it was. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so what are some of the tools? What are some of the ways that people can deal with resentment?
Mm-hmm. So firstly, understand what it is.
Yeah.
Understand that you are re-feeling and re-experiencing something, and that you have the power to stop that. And that as you continue, so just like you just said, when you feed and water something, okay, so think about this. Think about the vast number of things that we experience in life that we don't remember.
Right.
Like, we only remember a tiny percentage of what we experience in life. And those memories are, not accurate, let's just say. I mean, like the science on that, right, is that we fill all kinds of stuff into a memory. But a resentment, because you are re-feeling and re-experiencing it, you are feeding it and watering it and making it strong and ingraining it. So you're not going to ever allow yourself to let go and forget those things that are creating this suffering in you, as long as you continue to entertain them and allow yourself to get caught in the narrative of it. So firstly, understanding what it is, that it belongs to you, that no apology, no acknowledgement, no, oh, they finally understand me, or I now finally understand why they did what they did. None of those things will clear your resentment. Only you can do that, and you can do it completely independently of the other person. So don't worry about needing anything from the person or the situation or the group or whatever it is. So that's the first, is to like know what it is and know it's yours.
Yeah. Own it, as they say.
And so there's a couple of things. So in terms of active management, when you notice that you're in the narrative, and so, when I talk about a narrative, what I mean is that usually maybe an emotion comes through, and humans, when an emotion comes that is intense, that we find uncomfortable, we have a hard time just going ahead and allowing that to flow through us, to like experience the feeling, experience the discomfort of the feeling, and let it flow through. If we do that, it literally takes about 90 seconds.
Right.
And then it kind of dissipates. It might come again, but over time it usually lessens. Instead, what we do is we tell a story about it. Oh, I'm feeling this intense emotion. We want to explain it, because if we explain it, then maybe we can somehow figure out a way to make it go away, because we don't like it. We don't like this, right? This intense.
Makes sense.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that's what I was doing.
Well, yeah, that's a normal human thing to do. It doesn't really serve us, because it sticks up our emotions, which really, emotions are just normal, natural ways of being human that should be allowed to flow through us. But it kind of gums those up, and then boom, we're off in a narrative. And so, how could he, like, I just don't understand. Right. After all that I blah, 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 and all the wonderful, trips we took, and everything I did to try to make him happy. And then I just don't understand how he could treat me that way and be so disrespectful, and not even, in my case, the infidelity was a health risk to me, because of my cancer history, and I had an HPV related cancer, and the cheating started when I was having cancer treatment and didn't have any immune system.
Wow.
Yes. And so
that's a big narrative right there.
Right.
Literally life-threatening.
Literally life-threatening.
Yeah.
And it went on for years. And the years were all during my 5-year recurrence period, where I was fighting to get my white cells back and fighting to hopefully live without a recurrence of an insidious HPV related cancer that I had. And so when I find out later that throughout all those years there was infidelity happening, and because my body struggles with HPV, there was potentially additional virus being introduced into my system, giving my immune system, right, even more to deal with. And so I really had a hard time letting go of that. So when I talk about a narrative, what I just went through, those are the facts of the situation. But those facts, I can spin those into a whole big upsetting, story.
Sure. We all do. I'm trying to remember. Oh, the Untethered Soul. Michael A. Singer wrote a book, and he talks about that, what you were saying about the letting it flow through in 90 seconds. And he says when that, what you're saying, he calls it the heart block. So when you can't let it pass through, that's because you've blocked your heart and your narrative. And that's when the narrative, if you don't block your heart because what we're doing is shutting ourselves down because we don't, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I know it. I felt it. And once you learn how to let that go through, that's a life-changing skill.
Yes.
For everything, for the rest of your life. Once you know how to do that and you understand that you are making that block, you're blocking your heart, you're creating the narrative. Once you do that, it's really so much easier to deal with life overall, I think.
Absolutely. Because you can have some intense emotions and allow them to flow through you and move on. And you don't get yanked off, track from whatever it was you were doing into a narrative that creates additional suffering in you. And most humans where that suffering is being created, they reach for anesthesia and in the form of various behaviors, right? Which often, right? And those anesthesia behaviors often then create more suffering. So yes, we find ourselves in a really kind of harmful cycle that keeps us stuck. And that people often, if we just take food and the struggles that people have with food, when food becomes anesthesia, it's, yes, we can talk about food and we can talk about what to eat. But if we don't get at that suffering underneath, what is the source of that suffering that is causing you to want to reach for food that, numbs you, but then harms you?
Right.
Dressing the
and
food.
I think my numbing was work. Like more unhappy I was at home, and the less attention I was getting, the less love I was feeling. It being home was hard. And so it was just like I just kept diving harder and harder into work, which I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. That's fully out of reflection. So yeah, I think alcohol, drugs, work, exercise. Exercise can even be.
Oh, anything. I do a whole show on anesthesia behaviors, and really anything that becomes outsized or that causes harmful consequences to you after it kind of does its numbing job, it, probably needs to be addressed and just either brought back into alignment with what, let's take TV. TV, there's nothing wrong with TV inherently, but if that happens to be one of mine, but if you sink into it and stay there to avoid the pain of what you're going through, or to avoid the action steps that need to be taken for you to move through something, then it becomes outsized and it becomes harmful in and of itself. So yeah, there are a vast array of anesthesia behaviors.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So,
is there another tool that you can suggest for dealing with this lovely situation that we put ourselves in?
Okay. So what to do to break a narrative? First of all, you can do any number of things to disrupt the thought pattern that is happening. So I have all kinds of suggestions for that, but you can say some nonsense words. You can dance, you can just break into dance a little jig. And these come from other authors and things that I've picked up over time. You can use a mantra. So if you know that this is something you're doing and you're working on it and you think, oh, I found myself in a narrative, you can use a mantra that disrupts it, that, maybe makes you laugh, or that reminds you, of what you're doing. I would sometimes, because these narratives were really going at me, like sometimes, and I was alone for 2 years of the pandemic, alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. And so I would literally out loud say, who gives a crap? And then I would answer my own question and say, nobody. That's who. Because
Mine was, I am enough. And I would look myself in the
yes,
mirror and say, you are enough. You
yep,
are more than enough. And that
yep,
came from a friend, a friend of a friend, actually. But yeah, that mantra thing really does work. And I think
I love a
I
mantra.
talk about that in my book quite a bit, but we're all enough, and
Yeah,
we have
there's
to be
nothing
there
wrong
for
with us.
ourselves because sometimes other people aren't there for us or can't be, like you said, during COVID. And it's the self-love thing we need to spread it around, like
Oh,
let that spread like COVID did, and would be a better world.
it's the
So,
secret sauce.
yeah, but I
So
love that. Who gives a crap?
yes. Yeah.
Nobody.
Who gives a crap? Nobody. And then like mine that's kind of aligns with yours and that's based on that book that was life changing is there is nothing wrong. I talk to myself in the you. So I would say there is nothing wrong with you. There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with you.
Mm,
So break the narrative it with some kind of a mantra and then apply what I call compassionate honesty. And all that means is you say the thing just like a journalist, like for instance, instead of me spinning up into the narrative that I kind of gave you a preview of, I ended up just saying, my partner lied to me and I believed him.
yeah.
Okay. Like if you take all the charged language and all this, just take that out of it and just
Mm,
so I just call it compassionate honesty because we just say
love
what it
that.
is. And so you say the thing. And then, so this is 3 things that you can do to prevent, like when you feel one forming and also to clear a whopper. And it's based on an inventory, which because I've been in 12-step recovery of one type or another for so many years, some of the tools that I use, I've just taken from 12 steps. And so creating a searching and fearless inventory and
Mm,
then saying that to somebody else is truly one of the sort of magical things that's
yeah.
in the
Sharing.
12 steps, right?
Yeah.
So I created an inventory. And so I said the thing using compassionate honesty, didn't add anything to it. I then wrote down what was, and this is like on a spreadsheet basically. And I wrote down what was the impact, like what was the true impact to me
Mm,
of this thing? Because that is, we need to get to that. We need to
yeah.
understand what is the true impact to me. And, if you find yourself writing things like, I feel worthless, stuff like that is what began to come
Yeah.
out.
Wow.
Then you're right. Then you get to the aha. So that is what is at the source of this suffering. I feel worthless. That is very different than he cheated on me.
Mm-hmm.
Very different.
Very.
So what is the thing? Compassionate honesty. What is the impact in a real, like, try to be as uneditedly honest as you can about what the impact was. And then secret sauce here, everybody. What was my part?
Yeah.
What was my part? And here's what I found with that. It does take some reflection and perhaps working with somebody, because it can be a little bit hard to kind of go, well, I didn't do anything and he did blah 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 and I didn't have a part. But I for most things, and my inventory ended up to be maybe 12 pages with this particular relationship because it was deep.
Yeah.
Um, some things I didn't have a part in that kind of were nagging things that hurt me, but for the most part, I did.
Yeah.
And what I found was it was not in any way about me forgiving the other person. It was about me forgiving myself.
Yep.
Yeah. So what is the thing? What was the impact? What was my part? And then you apply compassion and love and forgiveness to yourself and you let it go and stop feeding and watering it. And I did not think I would ever not be in pain over that.
Right.
I am not. I
Right.
am no longer in pain.
And it's amazing. And yeah, and I think more than anything, I think that's where we're both that's our mission is to let people know that. I mean, you're a coach. I'm a coach. That's my mission. I want people to understand how much power they have. And that power is in the choice to follow these steps that you just laid out for them. The choice to talk to someone about it. I think, my friend Kay Harvey says, it's a quote from somewhere, but grief is like water. The more you spread it around, the more it evaporates. And so to me, what that means is I have to share this with someone. Like you said, that's a big part of that is kind of the accountability, the ownership, to me, that was also the final step of letting go, to be able to look in the mirror and say, I forgive you, I release you, and I want you to be happy. And
exactly.
Yeah. But I was the one who had to do that. I said that to my ex-husband as well, which you don't have to do, but I had to say it to myself. I stayed somewhere where I was unloved. I stayed in a place that made me hurt. And I had to forgive myself for that. But then I had to break the cycle of it too, because it was 6 years. So it had become a cycle. Yeah. So I love that. I love the inventory. I've never done that before, and I think I will. Why not?
Well, and it was interesting what happened. I had a therapist for about a year who I used as a touchstone. And so I started to deliver parts of that inventory, not for the whole session, but over time, I didn't want to do it anymore. Like it lost its power.
Yeah.
And I had moved on and I wanted to do other things with those sessions. And I was like, I'm done with this. And then burn, delete, whatever, like, don't keep it. I learned that from one of my 12-step sponsors after I had delivered what is in 12 steps, a 5th step, which is where you take your inventory and you verbally tell another person what is in it, which is very, very powerful. You don't hang on to it and reread it and go through it again. You're done. You release yourself from it.
You gotta let it go.
Yep.
I love it. Own it, then let it go.
Exactly.
I like that. Oh, wow. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your incredible wealth of knowledge. I think I know I'm helped, and I'm sure the listeners will be too. And I appreciate you sharing that, because it's going to make a difference in someone's life hearing it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm in this life right now because of healing through all of those things. I wanted a new life and I made a new life, and healing and finding unconditional positive regard for yourself will allow you to do absolutely anything you want.
Well, I'm going to put this in the show notes, but tell people anyway, in case they don't have access to it, how they can reach you.
You can find me at my website at giraffetangooctopus.com. And you can find me across social media at GTO Coaching.
GTO Coaching. Awesome.
And I'm on Voice America and my radio show, which is also on all the podcast platforms, is called GTO, Freedom for Humans.
Freedom for Humans. I love that.
And
that's really what, we can set ourselves free. That's what you're coaching.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And again, I'll put all the information about Kirsten and her practice in the show notes, but thank you for listening today, and power on.
Kelly's book is available on Amazon and through your local bookstores. Look for the Swipe Right Effect, the power to get unstuck. Kelly's interviews with 10 friends from around the world unlock powerful truths to getting your new life started.